Hello and welcome to Motor Week. On this week's programme, Glenda McKay has a VW two-way test between the Passat and the Golf. Ian Royle pushes the Porsche 911 to the limits on a track day, and we'll also be looking at the new Renault Laguna V6.
No one tries harder than Seat to inject some sparkle into the Volkswagen group, and in recent times their reputation is growing for creating some pretty polished performers. Their masters in Germany have put pay to previous quality problems with a policy of platform sharing, which has the benefit of keeping costs down as well. How much room that leaves for individuality is debatable, but Seat are having a good go at being different, and since the Ibiza's recent facelift, it's completely transformed. These rather funky taillights flank a large Seat badge at the back, which leaves you in no doubt as to what's just left you in its wake. The new face at the front sets it apart from the VW Polo that it shares a lot of its oily bits with. And these 16-inch alloy wheels give it a rather aggressive look. But one thing that you won't find in the VW Polo lives under here. This is the same 1.8 20-valve engine, albeit in a lower state of tune than you'll find in the Audi TT. It's got 156 brake horsepower and will shoot the Ibiza from 0 to 60 in an amazing 7.9 seconds, going on and up to over 130 miles an hour. Unfortunately, the problem with having an interior that's influenced by Germanic quality control means that you get a rather dark and austere fascia. Personally, I could live with that, because the logical layout and the quality feel to all the switches and fittings mean that you wouldn't have to put up with bits falling off all the time. Even if the plastics are a little hard in places, our only other niggle is these rather attractive sports seats actually nip the hips of all but the slimmest of drivers. 156 brake horsepower in a car smaller, lighter and cheaper than a Golf is normally a recipe for big grins. Which it is, but only for out-of-town use, because the clutch and the throttle response is really quite unsubtle for those city cues. The clutch in particular is quite heavy and takes a lot of getting used to. The engine feels like it's been held back on a leash. Above 2,000 RPM there's a healthy pull, but if you hold the gears past 3,500 RPM, all hell breaks loose as the turbo really kicks in. So is it a classic hot hatch? Well, yes and no. I mean, compare it to a sophisticated chassis that you'd find in a Peugeot 205 or 306 GTI, and the Cupra, well, it's really a bit of a brute. The steering doesn't communicate with you very much, and if anything, the Cupra comes across like a miniature TVR. The power is similarly addictive, the chassis similarly unsophisticated. There's plenty of grip at low speeds, but get it out onto the open roads and you'll feel all four wheels start to drift as it pushes wide on fast corners. But once you get used to the Ibiza's lively personality, you can really quite enjoy it. From there on, it's fun all the way. Low-speed tram lining seems to disappear as the speed rises, and you'll find yourself pressing harder and the grin on your face getting even wider. Now, before you start worrying about how much this is going to rip a hole in your wallet, the best bit is yet to come, because the Cupra is a surprising £12,995. So what do you get for a whisker under 13 grand? Well, quite a bit of kit, actually. A trip computer, set and forget air conditioning, an integrated 6-speaker stereo, and a part leather interior. And of course, that addictive performance. Putting an engine normally associated with a class above in the Ibiza has caused the opposition a bit of a dilemma. I suppose the closest in concept is the Renault Clio 172, but somehow the Ibiza's just got more character. The Spanish would say it's Latin flair. We would say, long may it continue. The hot hatch had a hard time in the early 90s with car crime pushing insurance premiums through the roof. But there has been a strong resurgence recently with cars such as the Renault Clio 172 and Seat's Ibiza Cupra. The hot hatch is back. It's here to stay and it's meaner than ever. So it seems strange that VW, the company behind the hot hatch revolution and the company that moulded the small car performance market as we know it today, should launch a diesel variant of their much-loved GTI. Now, when the Golf was launched 20 years ago, other manufacturers desperately tried to capture the magic and put it into their own pocket rockets. The question is, can this GTI pretender live up to the family name? Now, the Passat TDI isn't going to get unwanted attention from your local scallies. No, it is more likely to get admiring glances from your dad and the local company rep. I'm not saying that this car is bad, I'm just saying it's a little bit dull. But since its recent facelift, it can take on the likes of the Mondeo and the Laguna. So the big question is, which of these VWs is going to give you better value for your money? Now, in the Passat, the fit and finish is first class and the driving position excellent. We've got electric windows, central locking and climate control as standard, and a must for any long distance driver, ceiling mounted sunglass holder. Now, there's enough space in here to sit 5 people comfortably, with room left over in the boot for anything you might want to put in there. Now, when the Golf was launched, it was supposed to have mass market appeal, which it did have, but somewhere along the way, VW forgot that philosophy because at a tad under £17,000, this car is now encroaching on BMW 3 Series territory. But VW still insist on marketing it against the likes of the Ford Focus and the Vauxhall Astra. So this Golf has got twice as many competitors as all of its rivals, which can outdo the Golf on most things, including the price. Inside, it's very Germanic. The seats are comfortable, but they're sporty and hip-hugging. The dash is very well laid out, uncluttered and certainly not gaudy. And the finish, well, it's exactly what you'd expect from VW. But my favourite bit are the blue lights that illuminate the dials when it gets dark. This is a great, if somewhat noisy car to travel smoothly and sedately round town in. But put your foot down and it'll respond quite eagerly. Get it out onto the country roads, work your way through the notchy 6-speed gearbox and you're going to be having a lot of fun. Under normal circumstances, the words performance and diesel don't inspire images of blast-down country lanes. But if you're buying a car with a GTI badge, you're going to be expecting impressive performance. Now, what I'm about to say might embarrass those of you who've got petrol versions of the 2-litre GTI. With a 0 to 60 time of 10.3 seconds, it pips the 2-litre by 0.02 of a second and matches the top speed of 121 miles an hour. In terms of performance, the Passat can't live with the Golf. But then again, why should it? After all, the car is aimed at a completely different customer. You don't buy a Passat for throwing around country lanes. No, you buy it for long drives up and down the motorway with your carpet swatches in the boot. But just for the record, the Passat has 15 brake horsepower less than the Golf. which equates to a 0 to 60 time of 12.4 seconds. So it's never going to have you on the edge of your seat, although it will have you costed in comfort. In a straight line, the Passat is a very refined car to travel in. It's really solid and it's got a good punch of power through the mid-range, but very much like the Golf, when you get to the corners, it really is quite wallowy, and I feel that this lets down the ride really quite drastically. So, which of the cars would you choose if you had £17,000 to spare? Well, they're both highly accomplished in their own right. I mean, if you want the hot hatch performance with the diesel fuel economy, then the GT TDI is definitely worth a look at. But if you're going to go up and down the motorway all day and you want more status than the Mondeo or the Laguna could ever afford you, then the Passat's the car for you. But which one am I going to pick? Well, it has to be the Golf. I mean, it is the legendary hot hatch. It looks fantastic, fabulous finish inside and out, and it's faster than Passat. And it's cheap to run. It might be a tad expensive at just under £17,000, but it's a VW, and I reckon you get what you pay for.
After the break, Ian Royle shows how to get the most from your Porsche on the track, and we'll also be looking at the Renault Laguna Touring. If you had to sum up the French using just a few words, what would you say? Well, superb capital city, fantastic food, pretty good football team, and a good few years ago they made some superb motor cars. But it's fair to say that in recent years it's all been a little bit dull for the French. Although cars like the Peugeot 406 and Renault's old Laguna function well enough, they didn't really stir the emotions in the way the Citroën DS once did. Well, now it looks as though Mr. Renault has had the wake-up call, sat up in bed and gone, "Mon Dieu, what are we doing? We need to be making cars like this, the new Renault Laguna." Whereas the old Laguna was quite rounded and soft, this new shape boasts bold and striking lines to create a style that this market hasn't seen for decades. In keeping with this new French style, Renault have opted to call this model not an estate, but a sports tourer. There's also a hatchback available with equally distinctive lines. Now, it's not just the styling on this car that's revolutionary, there's a huge amount of technology as well that until recently you could only find on very expensive luxury cars. Keyless entry, you get that on a Merc S-Class. Now, once you're inside the Laguna, the technology continues. You've got quite a clever, almost head-up display, which actually monitors the tyre pressures. There's a synthesised voice that lets you know if the tyres are going down or if you've got a door open, and there's driver-passenger airbags and an electric sunroof. Now, satellite navigation and electronic stability controls are available as an option, but everything else I've mentioned does come as standard. And the materials that Renault have used in this new car, well, they feel very, very good, very high quality. And it's quite a nice place to spend time. And remember that keyless ignition? Put it in the slot, press the button, couldn't be easier. Now, although this new Laguna isn't as softly sprung as the old one, it's still a very French ride. They tend to go for comfort rather than sporty performance, and it means it's a lot less firm than some of its rivals. And when you start to push it, especially on these A roads, it does feel a lot less composed. But when you get out onto the motorway, it's a completely different story. The ride is superb and the car feels extremely refined. And as for noise, well, you've just got a bit of a purr from that V6 and a bit of wind noise to keep you company. There are currently 3 petrol engines and 1 diesel available to the Laguna range. The petrol starts with a 100 brake horsepower 1.6. There's also a 1.8 and it's topped by the 210 brake horsepower 3 litre V6, and that's the one we're driving today. There's only one option available for diesel fans at the moment, the direct injection 1.9 DCI, but a more powerful 2.2 litre model will join the range later in the summer. So what about performance figures? Well, on the V6, 0 to 60 takes just over 8 seconds and you get a top speed of 147 miles an hour. But if the company aren't paying your petrol bills, the fuel consumption might be a problem because it's just over 27 miles to the gallon. But don't despair, because the 1.8 engine Laguna is no slouch. 0 to 60 is 10.7 seconds, top speed of 126 miles an hour, but a much better fuel consumption at over 37 miles to the gallon. This is obviously a very important car for Renault as they plan to sell 230,000 Lagunas each year worldwide. But to do so, it's going to have to take on strong new competition from the likes of the new Ford Mondeo, Volkswagen's new Passat and the arch rival Citroen's sophisticated C5. Now, whilst we're not saying that this new Laguna is going to become a major French icon, it has certainly brought a lot of new flair and style to the class. And on looks alone, it's a winner, and that's without taking into account the amount of kit you get for the standard specification. So I think, Mr. Renault, you can sleep at night because très bien, it's a job well done.
You work hard and finally get into the position to afford your dream car, a Porsche. But what's the point in having a supercar with so much potential if you haven't got the experience to use it safely on the roads today? Well, that's why Porsche have introduced the Porsche Driving Experience, a chance to spend a day with a qualified instructor teaching you on and off-road driving skills. Today we've got the use of a 911 Carrera 4 and my instructor is Steve Smith. So Steve, what are we going to look at today?
Hopefully we're going to look at some of the safety features which are built into this car, some of the technological gadgetry, and also looking at some driving skills both on-road and off-road to try and help you to enjoy your Porsche in safety.
So we've got the use of a private test track. What are the main benefits that can teach to somebody, hopefully me by the end of the day?
Well, what we have is the opportunity to be repeatable. We can take you around the circuit and show you something. If you haven't got the hang of it, then we can do it again and again and again in a safe and controlled environment. We also have the use of a bold circuit, so we can look at some speed issues. We have a steering pad, so we can look at steering and acceleration issues. And then we've got a short circuit, so we can actually take you around and look at the balance and dynamics of the car.
So we're going to look at all aspects of the way that the car handles and braking and understeer and oversteer, and hopefully at the end of the day I'll go away a better driver.
I hope so. That's the name of the day, yes. Now the secret of driving on a bowl is to be smooth. The smoother you are, the more effective it is. Now you can see we've got the white line to our right hand side. If we keep that white line about 6 to 9 inches away from the driver's side right hand wheel, then that will be the optimum running area. So we're easing the car through now, doing around 82, 84 miles an hour. Now the exit you can see on our right there is where we do our braking exercises. So we're going to go around one more time and then I'm going to do the braking exercise. So that's 109 miles an hour. And you can feel the car, the ABS is working its way, and then we're to a complete stop. Now when I did that, you may or may not have noticed, but I put the clutch completely to the floor when I braked. There are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it removes the engine from the drive scenario, so it gives us the ability to stop slightly quicker. But also, with the pedals being quite close together, which is great for heel and toe, there are a few people that, particularly if they've got broad-soled shoes on, they can catch the throttle and the brake together. So with the clutch down, we haven't got 300 horsepower driving us at the problem. So getting the clutch down is quite important. The other thing, of course, is that if you brake really, really hard, occasionally you can stall the engine. If you stall the engine, then obviously there are downsides to that, especially when you look in the mirror and there's a big truck about to climb all over you. So with the steering pad we have here, as you can see, it's just a large area of tarmac. And what I want to do is look at the relationship between the steering wheel and the throttle. As we take the car around, you can see that we've got these control circles. So if I take the car towards the control circle just on our right here, I've got the car in second gear, and we're just cruising it around. And I've set the car with a reasonable amount of steering on so that we follow the yellow line. And I'm going to keep the steering wheel perfectly still. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to increase the throttle gently, and you'll see that even though I don't move the steering wheel, that the car starts to go in a wider and wider and wider circle, which is basically understeer. I can push the car further and further out. I still haven't moved the steering wheel, but we've moved at least 10 metres out. Now at this point you'll see the little orange light coming on the dash and the power being taken away from me, because this vehicle is fitted with Porsche stability management. Now when I take the power back off, then the car returns back to where it started from. With the power, just trying to be smooth with it and be delicate, just keep the car nice and balanced all the way through so that the car just works. You can feel the suspension starting to tuck its way in as we come through. Just a little smear of the brakes as we bring the car into the next bit, and then back onto the power. Just easing it down into the second gear, just turning in smoothly, keep the car nice and balanced, turning in to the right again, just feeding the car through to my left, and then back on the power. So what I'd like to do now is to swap seats with you, and
It's time for me to have a go.
Introduce you to the car.
Right.
Good. Okay.
I have to say, driving at almost 100 miles per hour around a high-speed bowl is an experience in itself and quite daunting at first. It takes some getting used to, but as you become more confident, the faster you go, and in the 911 the experience is quite supreme.
On next week's Motor Week, Richard Hammond will be driving in style as he takes a look at the Aston Martin DB7 Vantage Volant.